Hello Summoners and welcome back to another ProGuides video. My name is Nathaning and we'll be going over the only macro guide that you'll ever need. Macro is one of those words that's kind of just thrown around a lot because it's kind of a blanket term. What is macro? How does one macro well? Is it something that you can learn or is it something that you can replicate? We're going to be going over all of that and more in this guide. So let's get started on what macro really is. Like I said, it's sort of a blanket term. In League, your skills can be divided up into two broad categories, micro and macro. Micro, meaning small, refers to the little things that you can do. The more common term for this is mechanics. The typical things are using dashes and blinks or just clean side steps to dodge incoming skill shots, landing your own skill shots, or pulling off impressive combos. But there are also a lot more advanced things, like using Mikhail's on yourself as support right before you get CC'd, or using an ability to buffer up incoming CC. Or one of my favorites, when a Senna drops off a ward to finish off an enemy with that Q. That one's pretty rare, but it is so satisfying. Mechanics aren't something that you can really teach in League of Legends. I mean, you can definitely see someone pull off a combo and try to work on it in the practice tool, but that's the key word, gotta practice those things. Or maybe you didn't know about the Mikhail's trick and now you try to implement it yourself. But even if you know exactly what you need to do, you need to have practice, and at the end of the day, you need fast enough hands and good reaction speeds to do things like that. But macro, on the other hand, is pretty much entirely based on how well you can use your mind. Sure, with micro, there's some overlap. Again, micro does involve some quick thinking. But macro, which means large or overall, is about the bigger picture. It's the strategy side of things. This is where having a lot of game knowledge matters. A lot of people use the term macro to simply refer to the mid and late game rotations. But if it encompasses all decision making and strategy in the game, that can't be all there is to it. Jungle pathing, wave management, where to ward, and where to roam. All of that and more things fall under the umbrella of macro. It's basically anything where you're using strategies and tactics to gain advantages and outmaneuver your opponents. You can copy a lot of macro from watching your favorite streamers or pro players, but that's only going to get you so far. If you're not in the exact same scenario, you won't really know what the right play is. You'll just be guessing. If you really want to be good at it, you need to learn how to comprehend it at a deeper level. You know, give a man a fish versus teaching him how to fish. This guide is definitely a good start for that, but if you feel like you want to go even further in learning what League is about, maybe it's time that you may head over to ProGuides.com. We have courses from all your favorite streamers and pros like CoreJJ, Aframu, and Xmithy to really help you understand the game at a deeper level. And if you want a more personalized experience, we have coaches available 24/7, ready to help you guys become the best. Our coaches are top tier players that have spent years climbing the solo queue ladder to get where they are now, and they're ready to share everything that they've learned with you. So come on over and have them check out your gameplay, so they can give you a big push in the right direction. You can find a link for our website down in the description box below. Now let's get back to the video, shall we? Okay, so anyway, back to the point of actually understanding macro rather than just copying it. So before, we talked about how to get good at micro. You need to practice a lot, right? You may see a cool combo or some little gimmicky trick, but even if you know how to do it, you have to train your hands to pull it off. This usually involves a lot of practice tool, and more importantly, just playing a lot of League games again and again until you get good mechanics. Well, macro is actually kind of similar. When it comes to the phrase game knowledge, there is a lot to know about League of Legends. There's the base damages, AP and AD ratios, cooldowns, and range that different abilities have. There's knowing jungle spawn timers and jungle clear speeds. There's knowing what ward locations are best depending on what time in the game it is and the state of the game itself. You could read all about that stuff and be a walking encyclopedia of League of Legends knowledge. But to actually be good at macro, you have to actually understand how it all ties together. You have to figure out your team's strengths and weaknesses, the enemy team's strengths and weaknesses, and how to weave in strategies together with all of that in mind. Let's take a look at a different type of macro that you have in a League game. I'm sure there are a lot of specific areas that you could include that we won't talk about right now, but these somewhat narrowed down categories are a good starting point. Early game macro for laners is mostly about wave management and roaming. The vast majority of the time, roaming is a thing for supports and some mid laners, though there are exceptions for a few top laners and occasional Twitch ADCs. Roams need to be pretty strategic to be worth it, since you're usually giving up farm and pressure in lane to go for one. Early game macro for junglers is about pathing. This is a lot more complex than laner macro. You have to decide which side and which camp to start with, which way you're going to clear, and which lane you're going to gank, if any at all. You also have to think about pathing into or away from the enemy jungler based on how well you can do the 1v1, and if the laners will affect that. You may have a completely free double scuttle in a matchup one game, but have to concede one or both crabs in the same matchup next time due to the enemy mid laner having a huge priority. Early game macro shared by all 5 roles is warding. Early warding is super crucial, since the meta for the past few years has been a pretty snowbally one. A lot of games are determined relatively early on, so having good vision control to prevent ganks is a huge factor. Once supports have their quests done and access to unlimited wards, things get a little bit safer, but up until that point, you have to deal with the long cooldown and short duration of trinkets. That means that you need to actually think about your ward placement. If you just throw your trinket in a lane bush to prevent your laner from hiding in it, now you don't have a way to scout out the enemy jungle ganks. Try to put your ward in a high traffic area, like one of the tribe bushes or one at the enemy red or blue buff. This gives you good info on where the jungler is or isn't, so you can predict where they may try to gank. As the game progresses, Macro remains focused on the two main points of wave management and vision control quite a bit, but it does become a little bit more strategic than it was in the early game. Early on, most of your macro was about either protecting yourself from the enemy's plays or making plays of your own, with the stakes usually being a kill or two. But at the later stages of the game, the stakes are a lot higher. A kill or two can easily be converted into a tower, dragon, baron, or even the entire game being over. So with higher stakes, you'll also need to have higher level tactics. You'll do things like have the support and the jungler shadow a split pushing top laner, so you can turn the enemy team's gank into an easy 2-for-0 fight in your favor. Another super important tactic to learn for the mid and late game macro is slow pushing. In case the name isn't clear enough, slow pushing is when you slowly build up a massive minion wave to crash at the enemy turret, rather than just mowing down the wave with a quick combo. You always want a slow push to be done with purpose, with that purpose usually being an objective spawn timer. If Dragon is up in 100 seconds, you can easily start building up a huge wave top lane and time it so it can crash to the enemy top tower just as Dragon is spawning. The enemy team is forced to make a decision. Either they let hundreds of gold die to a turret or they give up Dragon. One last little thing that may seem apparent but many people don't exercise in the game is understanding that you need to line up cooldowns and death timers with objective spawns. For example, if the dragon is up in a minute and you go use your Malphite flash ult to make a pick on a single target, that's probably a pretty bad play. Unless it's pretty late into the game, a minute is plenty of time for someone to respawn and get back to the map. And now you don't have your flash or even your ultimate, so you're useless in this fight. If you instead went for the play 30 seconds before a dragon has spawned, it goes from a wasted free objective. Aside from making sure that your cooldowns are up, it's also a really good idea to make the enemy blow their cooldowns before a dragon fight. A tactic I try to implement every game is making sure the enemy carries don't have their summoners up. I do this by forcing a fight hard about 2 or 3 minutes before the dragon is even up. You'd be surprised how much of an impact this makes, especially if the carry that you're targeting is the only threat on the enemy team. Sometimes you'll even get the enemy team to outright concede objectives if their carries don't want to fight without their safety nets. Now that we've laid out some of the slightly more narrowed down macro concepts, let's talk a little bit about how you can learn how to make these good macro decisions. I've come up with a list that I call the 5 golden questions. It's pretty unlikely that you're going to be asking yourself these questions every single time you make any decision in League, but they're a great way to steer you in the right direction, so try to keep them in mind as much as you can. They are especially useful in VOD reviewing to help you really understand your own decision making and to stop yourself from making the same mistakes over and over again. Those questions that you can apply to pretty much everything that you do in League are: what am I doing? Why am I doing it? What do I get out of it? What is it costing me? And lastly, is it worth it? These questions help you weigh the pros and cons of any play that you make. Let's throw in a quick example. Looking back at our different categories of macro, we have roaming. Let's pick a scenario based on that. Let's say that you're playing the mid lane and your matchup is Ahri versus Echo. You've been poking Echo all lane and you have built up a bit of a CS lead over him. He's about half HP and 25% mana. He's forced to play under his tower now. You're completely in the driver's seat for this lane at the moment. You're healthy and have plenty of mana. At this point, you can choose to make any play that you want and there's not really much that he can do to stop you. You see the bot lane is right in the middle of the lane and start walking down. Now apply these 5 questions. What are you doing? Roaming to bot. Why are you doing it? The enemy laners are extended enough that you think you can get some kills. Those first 2 are pretty simple, but the next couple of questions are the ones that you need to think about with some foresight. What is it gaining you? Well, the easy answer is you get a double kill, which nets you 600 gold, and your teammates get 300 gold from assists. What is it costing you? You may be giving up a minion wave or 2 mid lane, but the other form of cost is that you're giving Echo some breathing room. All that pressure that you built up is now gone. Finally, is it worth it? In short, the answer to this specific scenario is yes. But what if there are other variables that affect this scenario that we laid out? What if the enemy bot lane is a hard to gank duo? What if your gank flops and you get nothing? What if you only get 1 kill out of it? There are so many factors that you need to take into account just before mindlessly running down the map and making plays. This is where foresight really comes in. Being able to react to certain situations is definitely a skill, but a much more important one is having the foresight to make the proactive plays. Once more, taking a look back at our macro categories, something that we talked about was knowing the timing of cooldowns and death timers around objective spawns. If your roams are aimed at converting kills into bigger wins, like taking turrets or dragons, then they're going to give you more of an overall win for your team. Finding ways to combine those different categories and coming up with winning strategies is exactly what it means to have good macro. The points and questions that we raised in this video are definitely a good starter kit to help you get better at macro. But the best thing that you can do is play the game a lot and try to actively think about your mistakes and how to improve from them. Don't just queue up, turn off your brain, and then go through the motions. And that wraps things up for our macro guide. Hope you guys enjoyed the video, and if you did, make sure you hit that follow button and hit that notification bell so you never miss out any of our content. And one last thing, don't forget to check out our Discord in the description box below. We're going to discuss League further or just hang out and be part of the community. I can't wait to see you guys back in the next video, but until then, stay safe, stay healthy, and have a wonderful day. Peace.